Welcome back, y'all. Happy Saturday. My name is Gaëtan, Gaëtan Nzowo, and welcome to Congo Unfiltered. Another day, another episode. Uh, we have a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about, just like every weekend. But before we get into today's program, I really want us to, I want to ground us in what has been happening, what is happening right now in the Congo, because it is fundamentally challenges a challenge to being able to describe what's happening in the context that is happening in the midst of the narrative that we see out there. um, what is happening challenges the language of peace that we have seen, that we have been hearing this past week. As we speak today, gather in this live, the Rwanda-backed militia, the M23, continues its military advance, and they have reached South Kivu, the city of Uvira. That event matters because Uvira is a strategic city bordering Burundi. It is also a humanitarian corridor, and I will say one of the last major urban centers in the region and of South Kivu, right? So it's one of the biggest cities also in South Kivu. So this advance did not really happen in a vacuum, right? Because we discussed the signing of the peace deal in June 27th of this year with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Congo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda. We discussed the December 4th signing with President Trump as a facilitator, and the two protagonists were the President of the Congo, Tshisekedi, and the President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. So it happened after a peace agreement was signed, and High to Goldfishman 123 and Jake, yes, we are back. And something really happened after everything, that all of this happened. And even before that, there was a visit of President Herzog, the president of Israel. And following the fall of the city of Uvira, with overwhelming evidence of Rwanda backing the M23. So there was a briefing at the United Nations security briefing on the DRC and MONUSCO, the UN force in the Congo, one of the largest in the world, actually. And they have acknowledged what Congolese people have long known, that this violence is not by mistake. It is by design. That the violence the Congolese people are facing is organized, sustained, and externally supported. So I'm going to show you the United States response, a statement at the UN, and it's very important because Ambassador Walls, he took off the gloves. Please take a listen.
Pleased to have convened DRC President Tshisekedi and Rwandan President Kagame in Washington on December 4th for the signing of the Washington Accords and the Regional Economic Integrated Framework. It was a true and sincere demonstration and effort towards peace. However, peace processes require parties to uphold their commitments to that very process. And the United States is profoundly concerned and incredibly disappointed with the renewed outbreak of violence in the eastern DRC. Today, I want to share with you some additional information on the scope and the sophistication of Rwanda's involvement in eastern DRC. Since its reemergence in 2021, Rwanda has had strategic control of its proxy armed group, M23, as well as M23's political wing, the Congo River Alliance, or AFC, and has deployed M23 and the AFC to achieve Rwanda's geopolitical goals in eastern DRC. Kagame has been intimately involved in planning and executing the war in eastern DRC, providing military and political direction to M23 forces and AFC for years now. The Rwandan Defense Forces have provided materiel, logistics, and training support to M23, as well as fighting alongside M23 in DRC with roughly 5,000 to 7,000 troops as of early December. This is not counting the possible increases from Rwanda in this most recent advancement. In more recent months, Rwanda has deployed multiple surface-to-air missiles and other heavy and sophisticated weaponry into North and South Kivu to aid M23 in its conflict against DRC. Rwanda and M23 began their offensive just this last weekend to take Uvira, with Rwandan forces co-located with M23 along the front lines. Additionally, we have credible reports of increased use of suicide drones, increased use of artillery by both M23 and Rwanda, including strikes into Burundi. So rather than a march towards peace, as we saw under President Trump's leadership in recent weeks, Rwanda is leading the region towards increased instability and war. And in light of the commitments made in the Washington Accords, we are deeply concerned that the Rwandan military's continued presence in Congolese territory in support of M23, and we will use the tools at our disposal to hold to account spoilers to peace. We call on Rwanda to uphold its commitments and to further recognize the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo's right to defend its territory and its sovereign right to invite Burundian forces onto its territory. We are engaging with all sides to urge restraint and to avoid further escalation, including refraining from hostile anti-Tutsi rhetoric. As this council negotiates the MONUSCO mandate, the United States will seek to ensure the mission has the capabilities to provide support to both the Doha and Washington agreements, keeping in mind that the parties themselves bear full responsibility for their successful implementation, and we look for the members of this council's support as we negotiate this mandate's renewal. MONUSCO's ability to provide critical enabling support to these processes, however, hinges entirely on its ability to move freely, to sustain itself, to implement its mandate without interference. And the fact that UN peacekeeping forces are under siege by forces backed by a member state that itself is a troop contributor to peacekeeping missions, frankly, is a sad hypocrisy. Unfortunately, M23's months-long blockade on MONUSCO has undermined its ability to operate effectively in and out of Goma, as many representatives have stated here today. And for its part, Rwanda continues to deploy surface-to-air missiles and additionally conduct spoofing and jamming operations, which have effectively grounded MONUSCO air operations. So how can MONUSCO succeed under these conditions? We demand the immediate end of such obstruction, which violates M23 and Rwanda's obligations under both the Doha and Washington agreements, respectively. We remain steadfast in our support of MONUSCO and its role in the realization of these historic agreements, which we believe hold great potential to end the decades of suffering in Eastern DRC. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement.
So you heard the ambassador of the United States to the United Nations, Ambassador Walls. And as someone who is speaking on behalf of the U.S., who was one of the facilitator to the peace deal, right? That they have to put out this statement at the UN Security Council condemning the violation of a peace agreement that Paul Kagame had just signed. And he's not the only one. There is also Christopher Longo, I think that's his name. And he, first there was Secretary Rubio, who issued a statement. But I first want to show, maybe in sequence, kind of like the statement that had been put out there by the United States and being able to read them to you. So the ICJ has expressed its profound concern regarding renewed outbreak of violence in the eastern DRC and the new offensive of the M23 supported by Rwanda around Uvira, South Kivu, close to Burundi, which risk destabilizing the whole region. So that's adding to Christopher Orlando, who is, I believe he is the deputy Secretary of State, and he served as the U.S. ambassador to Mexico before, and he's currently serving as the secretary at the State Department. And he said, "I admire the nation of Rwanda in many ways after the horror of the genocide 30 years ago. They have built prosperous and stable society that's a model for African development. As POTUS, Donald Trump, and Secretary Rubio made clear earlier this month, we are looking forward to partnering with them and their neighbors on exciting project that will benefit all our peoples. But that's not going to happen if they keep playing the same old games with M23 in Eastern Congo. The recent Uvira offensive has been an uncharacteristic and grave mistake, and I hope we can get things quickly back on track." End of quote. That's Christopher Orlando, the Deputy Secretary at the Department of State, and he was commenting Secretary Rubio tweets or statement, who said in the tweets on X, "Rwanda's action in Eastern DRC are a clear violation of the Washington Accords signed by President Trump, and the United States will take action to ensure promises made to the president are kept. I'm going to repeat that again. Rwanda's action in Eastern DRC are a clear violation of the Washington Accord signed by President Trump, and the United States will take action to ensure promises made to the president are kept. These are the different statements put by the different statement put out there by the United States. The United States seems, at least in rhetoric, and we see that, hitting strong, condemning the violation. And not just the United States. I think the statement that I read at the beginning, it wasn't just the US. It was also other countries that are in this small, I would say, council in the Great Lake region. There was France in there. I think the UK is also there. So it's not just the United States in that the very first tweets that I read to you guys. This one. All right, where is it? No, I think it's, I think I lost it. Yes, that one. Thank you. Thank you, Sparrow. Joint statement by the International Contact Group for the Great Lake region. So back to what I was saying, they're all calling Rwanda's action as a clear violation of the agreements. But what do we at Friends of the Congo think? What does my guest, who is not a stranger for this special episode, Kambale Musavuli, thinks? But for Friends of the Congo, we have to ask a harder question when we see all these condemnations. What does condemnation mean without really enforcement? Really, that's the question we have to ask, because this is a déjà vu. Expressing concern, that we are deeply concerned, that we are worried, that we condemned. These are words that we keep listening or hearing over and over again when it comes to Rwanda violating the integrity of Congolese sovereignty. Because despite the statement, the advance continues, and I said that. The M23 continue to advance, and the ambassador described clearly how they even have the capability to advance, to overrun the M20, the MONUSCO, to overrun early this year South African Defense Force, to overrun early this year the Samia DRC's force. So the South African Development, the SADC force in the Congo. So the civilians continue to flee in the midst of all those combats. And of course, Rwanda continues to act with the full confidence of a state that does not expect consequences, only diplomatic words like the one that I just read. But there's another silence that matters, because while the international community really want to emphasize that diplomatic pressure on Rwanda, I don't think that there is a comparable emphasis on a Congolese military response, because the Congo has the right to defend itself. That's what we hear about Israel day and night. The Congo has the right to defend itself. Actually, during the same meeting, the Burundian ambassador to the UN, he said the exact same thing, because on December 4th, the day Rwanda was signing the peace or the strategic, whatever you want to call it, peace deal, that they were bombing a Burundian city. The Rwandan government bombed, injuring civilians in Burundi. And the Burundian government representative said that Burundi has the right to respond proportionally. So that really tells us something very important, right? That we emphasize, or the international community emphasizes on the diplomatic pressure on Rwanda, but does not want the Congo to defend itself. It means either this restraint is being framed as strategic because there is minerals, because there is a deal. You cannot have a supply of minerals if there is like a full-scale war, right? Regional, because Burundi is also involved. How people are going to even come and dig, how people are even going to send trucks, right? So it's either being framed as strategic or it reflects a really deeper reality there. And that's the reality that at Friends of the Congo, we have been repeating over and over again when we talk about Congolese gaining its sovereignty. That deeper reality is that the Congo has been systematically weakened and conditioned to wait for external mediation, because that's what we see that the president keeps doing. Even as his territory is taken, Bunagana for 3 years now, Goma early this year, Bukavu followed, and now Uvira, they keep advancing. And the solution on the Congolese side is, or has been always, to go back to the United States and cry. To go back to the United Nations and cry. So from that perspective, of Friends of the Congo, the moment confirms of familiar patterns again. The peace process, peace processes, because there have been so many that prioritize regional arrangements, economic access, while justice is absent, while accountability for aggression is deferred, sometimes indefinitely. And this is where tonight's conversation really begins. Because the events, the violence that we've seen in Goma, in Bukavu, in Uvira, these UN briefings, the different statements from Washington that I read to you are all connected. So over the past few weeks now, we have watched a sequence unfold that many treats as separate moments, right? The President Isaac Herzog visit to the DRC for the very first time. A peace deal there. A signing ceremony in Washington here. But when you place all these events side by side, you can draw a clear picture of the situation. A clear picture of why President Isaac Herzog was in the Congo and then went to Zambia. Why before that, Benjamin Netanyahu met with President Tshisekedi. When before that, Tshisekedi spoke at APAC as a chairman of the African Union, who has a clear position on the issue of Palestine. And then the situation with Israel, very clear. But as a chairman of the AU, President Tshisekedi went to APAC in the United States and spoke. The following year, flew to Israel to kiss the famous wall. All these are connected to have the June 27 peace deal signed. by the foreign ministry of both countries, the Congo and Rwanda. So-called peace and economic agreement between Rwanda and the DRC. So these moves are being presented as diplomacy. Congolese folks that are close to President Tshisekedi, they always say, I don't know if it's just saying sarcastically, because I think it's an insult to themselves. Diplomatie en marche. Diplomacy, talking about the diplomacy of President Tshisekedi moving forward, right? They present these actions, these agreements, this peace deal as progress, as stabilization. Yet on the ground, the violence hasn't stopped, like I mentioned. So once again, Congo's future is being negotiated outside of the Congo with very little accountability. So the question isn't simply, is this a peace deal? No. The real question is, really, peace for whom? And at what cost? So that is the question essentially in that conversation that I tried to explore in an amazing conversation with my brother, Kambale Musavuli. He is a researcher and a longtime Congo analyst. And he's also from the house. When he was a student spokesperson for Friends of the Congo, and then moved as a national spokesperson for Friends of the Congo. And he did that with honor, with hard work for over decades. So I sat down with him to unpack what was actually signed in Washington, why Washington matters, how Rwanda, the United States, and regional actors fits into this moment, why President Herzog of Israel visit the Congo, and why that visit cannot be separate from everything that followed. And lastly, trying to mirror what's happening in the Congo and what's happening in Palestine, and trying to not just learn from the Palestinian struggle, but also see how the same playbook, the same tactics, the same strategies, whether they are being applied in the Middle East, in Latin America, will have the exact same effects in Africa, in the heart of Africa, in the Congo. So this conversation is about really this dynamic of power, resources, the narrative surrounding justice, who is a victim and who is not, who's committed crime and who is not. And above all, because we always want to center the people, it is also about the dignity of the Congolese people. So rather than having me, because I can do that, and I have a little bit, summarize that for you, I want you to hear it directly from Kambale Musavuli. So let's go to the recording. Kambale, how are you?
Good morning. I'm doing well. It's the best I can say for now, right? That I'm doing well, but lots going on. Lots going on back home.
Indeed, and over the past few weeks, and I would say even few months, we've witnessed a sequence of events that are not accidental, very connected. We've had the peace deal signed on June 27th, the so-called peace deal. And then we had the first, I would say, Israeli presidential visit to the Congo, President Isaac Herzog. And then followed by the signing of a strategic, or I guess the second part of that peace deal between President Tshisekedi and Kagame. And less than a week, I will even say the following day, fightings continued between the Rwanda-backed militia, the M23, and the Congolese government and the Wazalendo. And then a few days ago, it was reported, confirmed, that the city of Uvira, which is one of the largest cities in South Kivu, had fallen. And really quick, the Tshisekedi's regime, the DRC regime, started accusing, rightfully so, of Rwanda of essentially attacking or invading the Congo and to continue to support the M23. And then the Rwandan government accused the Congolese government of doing the exact same thing by not disarming the FDLR, and also accused the president of Burundi of also having troops. So really, to help us kind of like unpack all of this, and I'm really glad that you joined us to help us unpack all of this. I guess from your perspective, first to get started, what exactly was signed on June 27th and then on December 4th of 2025?
What was signed on June in June 2025 earlier and a few months back, I think it's being called a peace deal, right? And I don't think it's a peace deal. I think it's an economic deal. I think it's a deal much more focused on access to minerals. It actually uses the spirit from the request of the Congolese government. Most people do not know that the reason why we even discussing this peace deal is because earlier this year, the president of the Congo, Tshisekedi, sent his emissaries to Washington, D.C. They all hired quite a few lobbyists who went through different channels. Some went through the Senate, some went to the U.S. House of Representatives, and some were able to get lobbyists who could get in touch with Donald Trump directly. And in at least what has been disclosed in Africa, I think it's African intelligence, that one of the emissaries was able to give a letter that reached Donald Trump. And this letter stated that Congo is willing to give the United States $3 trillion worth of resources in exchange for U.S. engagement to rein in Rwanda in the conflict that's raging in the East. So that's why all of this process that we're seeing has unfolded. It's a request from the Congolese government, from the Tshisekedi government, to get the U.S. engaged in stabilizing the DRC. That's already a problem, right, in the context, because it's the U.S. engagement comes at a time where, at the international level, at least at the UN Security Council level, there has been a push for accountability for Rwanda, specifically with the UN Resolution 2773, asking for Rwandan troops to leave Congolese soil and for Congo's territorial integrity to be respected and protected, right? According to, we can go AU Charter and international law and so on. So them going in June to sign what they call the Declaration of Principles, to come up with a regional economic framework of sharing Congo's resources, having foreign ministers of DRC signing it, and now the president of DRC and Rwanda signing it as well, really is a, I'm trying to think of words. The word that I'm thinking about is actually what we say in Lingala, is a buzoba, right? Like you sit there
Foolishness.
How can a president who says he's been voted by the Congolese people, who says that he must respect Congolese constitution, who does everything contrary to the Congolese constitution, right? The entrance of the DRC to the Eastern African community against Congolese constitution, against Congolese, there was no Congolese consultation. The economic pact between Rwanda and Congo a few years back on gold, right? The Dieter Limited company to refine, to get access to Congo's gold and refine it, right? A Rwanda-Congo deal without any consultation of the Congolese people. And now the same thing is happening with this deal. So we could delve into the details of this deal where we say, some have said the M23 is not mentioned in the deal, right? It's not a big issue for me because the M23 is the Rwanda Defense Force soldiers. We can delve into the issue that Section 6 of this agreement, the Regional Economic Framework, is giving away mineral resources. I always point out, even though we're talking about minerals, but there is a bizarre clause about national park management, right? That Congo has to manage its national park with the support of Rwanda, which is bizarre. So millions have died in the Congo because of the national park. Why are national parks being mentioned in this peace deal? So we can go on and analyze line by line how this agreement doesn't make any sense. But from the US perspective, it makes total sense. Someone has willingly given you mineral resources for free, $3 trillion worth of resources, and you don't even have to fire a bullet for that. And Trump said it well, right, at the signing, right? We're going to make a lot of money. And I think a few days ago, Trump had a rally where he even stated himself that, the Congolese, they came and begged him to take the minerals, right?
Yeah.
And he said, yes, we are going to take the minerals. That's the interest of the U.S. And that's always been the U.S. interest from 1885 to today. In 1885 at the Berlin Conference, the U.S. participation at the Berlin Conference, right, supporting King Leopold, was access to Congo's mineral resources, which they had access to. Today, the King Leopold of the Congo, I'm calling it Paul Kagame, right? This peace accord mirroring what happened at the Berlin Conference is the same. The U.S. appears as a non-partisan actor in the deal, benefiting from the resources, while I could even argue on the day of signing, December 4th, people were still being killed in the eastern part of the DRC. Even though people are mentioning that on December 5th, we saw the uprising. People have been dying every single day, being displaced from their homes, witnessing horrific crimes without accountability. So I'm sorry I'm not going directly to your point, but I think when we are discussing the deal itself, the content of the deal, there is a international responsibility to the situation in the Congo, but there is a fundamental call to the Congolese people themselves, inside and outside, in saying, if in 1885 we were not in Germany during the Berlin Conference, we did not even know how they were carving up the African continent, and we saw how we have been affected. In 2025, what will be the call for the Congolese youth? Witnessing that the future of the Congo is land and resources, which Kwame Nkrumah said will be the engine for the transformation of the African continent, is being given away due to the fact that we have neo-colonial agents, be it in Kigali or Kinshasa. Will we stay silent, or we will organize, just as it is the case with Kenyans, right? Kenyans have signed a deal with the United States. The President Ruto he signed a health deal to give away access to Kenyans' data to the American corporations, right? What did the Kenyan courts do? They have called this unconstitutional and illegal, right? So even though the president went to Washington signing the agreement, according to Kenyan law, what he did is against the law. So it's a fundamental call to Congolese, and we know some of them are policymakers, right? I'm going to call one out. Nyenemo Sanguma is a member of parliament in the DRC. He has a very good heart, right? Is he going to sit in the Congolese parliament watching what is happening, or will he do something about it? And we have many more members of parliament in DRC who can stand up and say, in 2025, we have a responsibility as Congolese to protect the sovereignty of our country, but also to challenge anyone who's organizing themselves to destroy the future of our country.
Well said. And talking about the agreements, the question that I've been asking myself into the call that you just made in trying to stop things and trying to change things, is this agreement even legally binding or just politically symbolic? Is it possible to reverse what was signed?
It is definitely possible to reverse it because, one, this agreement does not engage the DRC legally because it has never gone through our parliament, right? If you remember, over a decade ago, one of the issues that Congo had with Rwanda at the National Assembly level was that Joseph Kabila, the president then, invited the Rwandan Defense Force soldiers to operate in DRC without consultation of the Congolese parliament. At the time, the head of the parliament was Kamere. Right? So Vital Kamere clearly stated that what the president is doing is unconstitutional. And two, we can't have foreign troops on Congolese soil without parliamentary approval. Right? So that's
he even resigned.
Indeed. The same thing is happening now, right? The president of the Congo, no matter his goodwill or good intent, can go to Washington and sign an agreement that has not been ratified by the National Assembly, right? That just does not happen. It does not have that type of power, right? On the side of Rwanda, by the way, Rwanda actually took it to parliament, right? After the signing of the agreement in June.
They look to be more democratic than the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which is bizarre.
Indeed. But we also have to understand how Rwanda operates, right? It's a state where I think most of they have the highest number of women in parliament, right? And I always make the argument it's laudable to have that, but are we saying that these are the women who are sending the Rwanda Defense Force soldiers into the Congo to kill Congolese people and rape Congolese women? The answer would be no. It's an authoritarian state where, at least for the face of the document, right, we can say it went through the Rwandan parliament, right, for due process. But for DRC, the president of the Congo didn't even bother to actually send it to the National Assembly for votes. But a few days ago, he was actually in the parliament, right? He made a speech in parliament. And while he was making the speech, no one in his cabinet had the courage to say, oh, let's at least drop off this document to parliament for them to discuss. So up until today, officially, the Congolese parliament has not seen this agreement that the president of the Congo has signed outside. So it hasn't even been ratified in DRC. So because of that, there are quite a few clauses in the Congolese constitution that could be used to hold the president accountable. I think it's 2014, 2015, and 2016 of the Congolese constitution that legislators in DRC could use as a means for holding the president of Congo accountable. And it will take a lot of courage from the legislators in DRC to do that. But I'm not hoping for the courage. I'm hoping for the resilience of the Congolese people to push their legislators in the right path. And it's been done before, by the way, right? We're not talking about this as Congolese have not done this before. If you remember in 2015, just as it is the case with Rwanda, our National Assembly, our parliament is also geared toward the regime in power, right? That they have the money and the power to tell them we want this to pass, and they can make it pass.
Yeah.
But when people are vigilant in DRC, it's actually been shown that Congo is one of the most democratic countries because the people can hold their leaders accountable if they are organized. In 2015, the Congolese government, as a way to extend power, was trying to enforce a new law, right? And that law was to, it was a law to be able to do a national census before the presidential elections, right?
As a condition.
Yes. And if they had engaged in that process at that time, it would have extended the mandate of Joseph Kabila, whose mandate ended in 2014. Presidential mandate ended in 2014. So he's been trying to figure out how to extend his presidential term. So that was one of the tactics. We are going to require that before we do presidential election, we have a national census of determining if you have 120 million people in the country. The people who stopped that were young people in the Congo, right? In January of 2025, what we call the Telema uprising, these young people mobilized in the streets, right, to actually put pressure on legislators. They were so successful that the government shut off the internet. They shut off SMS. So you couldn't even call in the country to get someone for a few days. It was for actually over 2 weeks. There was no internet inside of the DRC, right? Due to the people organizing and challenging the National Assembly and the Congolese parliament. But in that process, there are a few things that I saw that reminded me of the power of the Congolese people. Many people died. Many young Congolese actually died during that time, right? But what I saw was, for the first time in my life, right, I was able to watch a Senate debate of the Congolese Senate on YouTube.
Yeah.
Live stream. The question was, why were they live streaming the Senate debate when before they never did? Well, they knew, the power of the Congolese diaspora, because on the inside of the country, there was no internet, right? So people on the ground, they were not the one watching the live stream of the Senate. The
national television was definitely not streaming it.
Exactly. So we were watching that live stream. The second was the voting, right? The voting of that law. Of course, the majority in the Senate voted against it, right? The voting result was read in Lingala. And this was the first time I saw a Congolese politician by the name of Kengo Adondo speak Lingala. And I was asking myself, why is he speaking in Lingala on the Senate floor? So he was speaking Lingala on the Senate floor to make sure that the Congolese people could understand what has just passed, what has just been stopped in the Senate. right? That we didn't vote it. Please go home. Don't protest. Don't destroy businesses, right? But these were young Congolese who did that, right? At least 400 of them died. The reason why I say 400 of them died in Kinshasa is because the same year, in March, 400 bodies were found in Maluku of people, buried in mass graves.
buried.
Right. So when I see that and I see the current moment, I'm not putting my faith only in the legislators who will have the courage to do X, Y, Z. I'm reminding the Congolese people that you have done this before. You are the country when the Belgians refused to give us independence. You went in the streets. They sent Belgian paratroopers to shoot people on January 4th, 1959 in the streets. You still say independence now. You mobilized and were successful at doing something that people did not think you could do. You are the one, after 20 plus years of dictatorship of Mobutu, you forced the so-called dictator to organize a national dialogue, right? Conférence Nationale Souveraine, the National Sovereign Conference, which was actually an emanation of the will of the Congolese people for a transition. You're the ones who stopped the rebels from moving town to town. Even till today, there's always been this push of carving up the Congo into smaller states, right? The balkanization of DRC. It happened before with Katanga, where Katanga became a country. Later was reconnected. Kagame is trying that with the eastern part of Congo. The reason why it doesn't work is because the people of that land, the 400 ethnic group of the land, not one tribe, 2 tribes, 400 of them who live on the land, know that their identity is Congolese. They know that millions have died for this land, that it doesn't matter what the West wants to do. It doesn't matter what the regional hegemonic blocks want to do in the DRC, that this land, this prosperous land, must remain united for the benefit of the Congolese people and for the transformation of the African continent. So my faith will still be in the people and reminding them of what they were able to do yesterday, and they can do it today as well.
And you mentioned Kengo Wadondo, and I think it's so very important to also contextualize it, who was for over decades, I believe, the president of Senate. He served as the president of Senate. And right after that, I would say historic moments, streaming live, trying to make sure that the Senate was responsible for officially saying, no, we're not okay with that. We do not want the census. We do not want the election to be conditioned by a census that's supposed to be happening every year as an administrative task. But it's very important to mention that a couple of years after that, and ironically, the same guy, the same person ended up joining the president's coalition that was trying to cling to power during the election, that ended up backing not just Emmanuel Shadari, but later even President Tshisekedi. So that's history. But because we also seen this before in terms of deals and things happening backdoor, and we're talking about a supposedly peace agreement, right? And it seems like the agreement speaks that's supposed to be speaking of peace is actually avoiding accountability, and agreements that name that does not name armed groups, that does not name states backing them. And you even say yourself that you wouldn't even mention or talk about the M23. It is the Rwandan Defense Force. And you talked about the Berlin Conference early. Would you then say that with all the history of peace deals signed in the Congo or by Congolese president with other countries, particularly the one of Rwanda, would you say that it is kind of like a historical pattern?
I will continue to say that what was signed in Washington is not a peace deal. Even though they're calling it a peace deal, it is not a peace deal, right? For you to have peace, right? Congo and Rwanda is signing a peace deal. in Washington. If they're signing a peace deal, it means that Congo and Rwanda are in conflict. So if Congo and Rwanda are in conflict, what is the conflict? Based on the document, they are framing the conflict in the DRC as a FDLR issue. FDLR is the Rwandan Hutus, who some of the commanders, according to the Rwandan government, actually, I'm going to quote her. Yvonne Makolo did an interview where Yvonne Makolo herself stated that there are about 12 commanders of the FDLR who are suspected to have participated in the Rwandan genocide, right? So let's say, for example, the FDLR, this rebel group, which has, I'll throw a number. Let's say there are 4,000 FDLR, right? 12 of them participated in the Rwandan genocide, probably in the 60s and so on. The majority of the FDLR are Rwandan Hutus. We will agree. So are we saying that millions in the Congo have died due to 4,000 Rwandan Hutus who are on Congolese soil when Rwanda has entered the Congo multiple times? If that's what we agree the conflict is about, then the document makes sense. Right? So it's a peace agreement to neutralize the FDLR committing the crime. So after 30 years, no, the conflict is going to end. But that's not the reality that we're seeing on the ground. That's why I said that the document is not rooted in history. The conflict in the Congo is not about the FDLR. The conflict in the Congo is a war of aggression by two countries, Rwanda and Uganda, who invaded the Congo twice in 96 and 98, and they continue to support proxy rebel militias such as the M23, right? So if we have to come to a peace deal, Rwanda must stop supporting proxy rebel militias. Rwanda must stop violating Congo's territorial integrity. That's how we're going to get peace, right? But to have that included there, then there is accountability. You know that we have M23 rebels using surface-to-air missiles. You know that this sophisticated weapon, right? There are not many around the world. That is easily trackable. You can trace it. You can trace who made it, who sold it.
Who sold it?
So if today we are saying that the ICC has launched an investigation on the crimes of the M23, and they've killed people in Kishishe, in Bambo, in many of the towns there. They've raped women, destroyed civilians, using these sophisticated weapons that we know comes from the West, we know come from the European Union, we know comes from the United States, that make these countries implicated in the genocide in Congo. Because willingly, right, willingly, they continue to support these nations when their own rhetoric is condemning them. So if the United States is condemning Rwanda right now, even after the signing of the peace agreement, yet Rwanda has weapons that the M23 is using on the ground with the Rwandan Defense Forces on the ground. Rwandan Defense Force, RDF, it's the Rwandan army, right? They are in DRC. They are supporting the genocide in Congo. So how are they going to put mechanism of accountability and justice when it's going to hold them also accountable? So that's what they are avoiding, right? What they want to do is almost follow the Entebbe principles that Bill Clinton pushed in the 1990s, right? After the killing of American soldiers in Somalia, the US swore that they will not have the soldiers die in Africa again.
Yeah.
So they don't send, so they're no longer sending their soldiers. What they're doing is they're using Rwanda, they're using Uganda, they're even using Kenya.
Kenya, Haiti,
right?
yeah.
So that these soldiers can do the bidding of the United States, of the Western world. So knowing that, Trump is very happy in having $3 trillion worth of resources that's going through the client state Rwanda. They don't have to lift a gun and shoot anywhere. All they have to do is get access to these minerals, cleans into Rwanda as clean minerals, and they don't have to do anything. So we know, I keep insisting, what was signed in Washington is not a peace accord. What was signed in Washington is the Act of Berlin 2025, giving away Congo's resources to the United States, just as Congo was given to King Leopold and called it the Congo Free State. Today, they're calling it a regional economic framework and listing even the companies, right? The interests of companies who want to have access to that. If we are clear about the perspective, we know that we must revive Patrice Lumumba's voice. Patrice Lumumba, before he died, told us it's not going to be where? Washington, Paris, Brussels, or the United Nations. He gave us already indication. If they're going to Washington for the Washington Accord, that's not where Congo's history is going to be written. If they're going to Paris, as Tshisekedi also did, right? That's not where it's going to be written. Our history is not going to be written there. Did Tshisekedi go to Brussels also? That's not where Congo's history is going to be written. Did they go cry at the United Nations? Of course. We are all talking about 2773, right? That's also not where it's going to be written. What did Lumumba tell us? Africa will write its own history. And it's going to be, to the north and the south of Sahara, a history of glory. And what is that history? It's the peoples to peoples connection. At this moment, Congolese should be connecting with the Kenyans who are challenging Ruto in court to find out how are the Kenyans able to challenge the government of signing an illegal accord in Washington, because the president of Congo signed an illegal accord for Congo, right? So we should unite under a Pan-African label of finding out what other Africans are doing for sovereignty at this time to be able to challenge the elites of the Congo, the regional elites, and the global elites who want access to our mineral resources at the detriment of the human beings living on the land.
And when you mentioned Trump, and I thought that was very interesting, the rally that he just did a couple of days ago, and he didn't even, he also mentioned China. He said that the Congo is begging for them to get minerals so they don't have to go through China. So there is this underlying, I guess, race to minerals, knowing how China has been ahead, and now they're trying to, essentially play catch up. And I'll pull up the deal that was signed on June 27th, and with the FDLR, and just remind the audience that the word FDLR in that peace deal is mentioned 43 times, and the words M23 is mentioned 3 times, and the third time being the glossary. So it is very evident, it's clear that this deal is really heavily siding for Rwanda, or actually trying to achieve Paul Kagame's objectives. And the other question that I have for you, because I was literally trying to also understand that peace deal that was signed on June 27th, why moving from foreign ministers to head of states? And like, is there like a difference, or did they sign 2 separate deals?
So for the first point on China, it's very interesting, right? When we talk about China in the context of US and China. I will always make the argument, to me, I find it very bizarre for the US to be so patriotic when the US flag is still made in China. So the day they start making their own flags, right, and the made in China is off, that's when this rhetoric that they have will make sense on one level. But 2, on the objective level, right? China is a country on planet Earth that has gone through a revolution, right? 1949 to present. We could argue that it's not even an argument, it's a fact. In 1960, the GDP of Ghana was higher than the GDP of China. And we have seen for the past over 80 years, right? The rapid growth that China has had. According to the United Nations, not just the Chinese, right? According to the United Nations, China, a country of 1.4 billion people, this country has eradicated extreme poverty. Right? And they've lifted of over 80 million people out of poverty. Right? So let's just switch for a second, okay? Let's say, actually, I'm gonna remove this for a second. Still can hear me.
Yeah,
okay.
Perfect.
So let's say, replace the word China with the United States. The United States has eradicated extreme poverty in the United States. What will be the global perspective, the world's perspective on the US? Wouldn't they be sending their consultants, their institutions to the world
To learn.
to teach, not just to learn, to teach the world how the US achieved it? So if that's the case, right, for African countries, if not the Chinese, the United Nations says that this country has eradicated extreme poverty. Shouldn't Africans be curious to find out how they did so?
Yeah.
Then now on the China's engagement in DRC, I want somebody to tell me which rebel group China supports in DRC. Direct or indirect? Right. I can, for example, say that there has been weapons used by rebels sold by Chinese companies. No, some UN report has documented that. I can say that, right? But is there any state support to any rebels in DRC?
No.
Is there any influence of the Chinese state to not hold perpetrators of violence accountable in DRC? Any involvement whatsoever that exists today of China in DRC in terms of rebels doesn't exist, right? But let's look at the other side. The United States. I mean, I could go from Patrice Lumumba to the Berlin Conference to Mobutu's regimes. There are so many examples, but I will use just the current example right now. The United States, for the past 4 years, has issued concerns, condemnation on Rwanda's support of rebel groups in DRC. That even Secretary Blinken, when he was Secretary of State, went to Kinshasa, and in a press conference in Kinshasa, he himself stated that the evidence provided by the UN group of experts of Rwanda supporting rebel groups in Congo is credible. Yet nothing happened. And fast forward to today, even with Rubio, the Secretary of State, even with Trump, right? That they are all clear that there is a rebel group in DRC called M23. And this rebel group has direct support of the Rwandan military. Also, the Rwandan military is physically present, right? And they have this evidence as photographic evidence, video evidence, right, from drone surveillance. So they have the evidence.
So why they're not doing anything?
Because they are complicit. The United States is complicit in the conflict. The United States has been complicit in the conflict since 1996 to now. That's
Even going against their own law, the law that you, as the national spokesperson for the Congo, advocated for. The public law. The public law. Yeah.
Public Law 109456, the Democratic Republic of Congo Relief, Security, Democracy Promotion Act of 2006, signed by George Bush in January of 2006. It was written by Barack Obama, right? Everybody runs away from that law. There is a law in the books in the United States. There is actually a law that says in Section 105 that the U.S. Secretary of State can withhold aid to any nation destabilizing the Congo. And let's look at what has happened with the M23. Rwanda and DRC signed a peace deal on December 4th. December 5th, the M23 start advance. Evidence from the U.S. intelligence themselves, from the UN group of experts, indicates that Rwanda Defense Force soldiers are there, clearly implicating the Rwandan government, Rwanda being an ally state to the U.S. But the U.S. is doing what? Did you see the
Releasing
statement from the
statement.
House
Yeah.
Foreign Relations?
Mm-hmm.
The statement is saying that they should condemn.
It's like they recycle the press statement every single time.
What condemnation?
We are concerned.
Everyone is already condemning. Why are you telling people that you need to condemn? There is action that needs to be taken. So the reason why the action, to your question, the reason why action is not taken is because the U.S. is complicit in the genocide in Congo, the same way the U.S. is complicit in the genocide in Palestine. As long as they are complicit and there is no internal challenge within the US government, within the United States, the citizens of the country, to say that we do not want our taxpayers' money to go fund wars abroad, to go support nations destabilizing others, that will continue. So there is grassroots work that needs to happen to hold American officials accountable. You can be an elected official in the United States, where every year you keep voting for the US government to support the Rwandan government, knowing that the Rwandan government is supporting rebels, raping and killing people in the Congo. That's complicity. It's direct complicity. So that is why the accountability is not taking place. But finally, on the points that I wanted to make, and it's really around the AR race between China and the United States.
Mm-hmm.
The race does not have to be brutal. And I'm going to give it as an example as a kid. You know, when we were at school, you know, we used to have this race who's going to be the first of the class. I don't know if in the US they do that, right? You know, and I remember the one year I was the third of my class. I was really sad because I wanted to be the first, right? So the first three always, you know, they call you in the front, you're the first of the class, the second of the class, and third of the class. I don't recall in that quote unquote competition of being the best in my class, me undermining my classmates, me making sure that my classmate failed the test, right? Like just thinking about someone who wants to be first. Do you have to undermine someone, or is your merit? So this is how I grew up, right? That the competition that may exist is on your own merits, how smart you are, how adequate you are, but also being conscious that not everyone will have the same ability, right? That if more is given to you, always remember those who do not have, right? So that's the context in which we grew up. When you look now at this competition on artificial intelligence, be it data centers, be it access, it's becoming a geopolitical battle that the US is literally blackmailing world government. We are discussing the Congo, but most people have not read the US-Malaysia trade deal. It's one of the biggest attempts to a national digital sovereignty that most people haven't even looked at. That when it comes to Malaysia, they have literally given away their right to use technology without consultation of the United States. Not only that, they can't even get access to new technology if they don't get approval from the US. So I let people just go read the US-Malaysia trade deal, right? We're talking about the Washington Accord. Go read the US-Malaysia trade deal and see what is actually happening. Then you come to Congo and you say, okay, if the US needs resources in the Congo, right? Do you have to support a nation that stabilizes the Congo to access the minerals? Or you can't just come to the Congolese and get it? That's what China did. China did not go to back doors, right? They actually came to the Congolese and said, we need copper, we need cobalt, we need lithium. That's how they are dealing. We do have challenges with a few Chinese businesses, right, who are actually doing shady deals in DRC. That can be dealt with. But in the process of engagement of the Chinese states, there are tangible physical infrastructure that Congo can show. A hydro dam, roads built, and so on. And of course, as I said, we can say some of them have not been completed. Others have been. You know, people have been using the cultural center in Kinshasa now. I think that's now open. People have seen the roads being built and so on. But on the US side, show me one road the US has built in Congo. I really want to see somebody say, oh, this is what the US has built in the past 30 years. But I can say a few things, right? I can say, for example, that the US Embassy, I think it was around 2012, posted on this website. Don't quote me on the year, I can't remember. I remember just a press release coming out where they were lauding how they just opened, what do you call it, wells in the Kasai region. Wells, we in the 2010s, right? We're talking about wells, right?
Yeah.
That's the picture that you want to post. Oh, we build a few wells for the poor in Congo. Build a whole water system for the community. That's when we will know that you are serious, right? Those are the infrastructure that we have seen. And now we are caught in the middle of this US competition where they don't want to come and deal with us directly because we follow the words of Kwame Nkrumah, not Tshisekedi. I'm talking about the people of the Congo, right? We follow the words of Kwame Nkrumah where he said, we're not looking east, we're not neither looking east nor west, we're looking forward, right? Mm-hmm. That we want to change the conditions of our people. If the US is able to build a water system for a city at a reasonable cost that is efficient, we will work with the United States. If China is doing the same, right? We believe in a multipolar world where those who will engage with African countries, with the Congo, are going to make sure to respect the people, work with them in dignity, and transform their conditions. That's not what the US is only interested in being the top country and nobody else should be above the United States. But if that's the case, do it on your own merits. Don't cause conflict, don't cause war, don't undercut anyone else. Just show that you're the best engineer in the world. Just show your best quantum computers that you have. Show your skills on your own merits, and people will see your work and say, you know what, we want to deal with that. I think I addressed the China question at length, and I could go into it if there are additional questions, but I forgot the second point that you made. I don't know if I addressed it also in my comments.
I think you did.
Okay.
Yeah. The second point was what was the difference between the president signing versus the ministers, the foreign ministers, and if that was two different deals. But I think you addressed that when talking about the two deals. One of the things that I also wanted to point out, because the things that when the narrative put out there when it comes to the issue of the Congo and Rwanda is presented as a stabilizing force, the country that is working. DRC is presented as failed states, and in the case of the deal, a willing partner. And the US is presented as a neutral broker, and you obviously debunked all of it. And now talking about the regional tensions that now is including Burundi, because the President Kagame literally was talking about this conversation that I found really mind blowing. That all the accusation he's made against the president of Burundi of having troops in the Congo or him not knowing, and I'm just like, that sounds familiar because that's literally a mirror of Paul Kagame's action in the Congo himself. But I guess, why do you think that President Kagame, particularly, he's suddenly attacking or mentioning Burundi or trying to sideline Burundi in this specific context?
It's hard to get into Paul Kagame's head to know what are his motivations. We can talk about it in very general, that Paul Kagame of Rwanda has always had an expansionist mindset. He and his clan and people around his circle believe in creating a ethno-state, right, that will be dominated by one tribe, particularly the Tutsis, in the region of the Great Lakes. People thought that this was a myth. If you even look at the statement coming from the African Union, surprisingly, even the US, they all are seeing what we have been saying for 30 years, that Paul Kagame wants to cover up the African continent, right? Particularly the DRC. It wants to take a portion of the DRC and make it into part of the country. And the expansion is not just in DRC. That expansion is toward Uganda all the way to Burundi, right? And when people don't have that historical context of what has been happening in the region, they are confused about what is happening, because you're talking about Rwanda separate from Burundi. People know about the Rwandan genocide, but how many people know about the Burundi genocide? Do people know that there was a genocide in Burundi of the Hutus a year prior to the Rwandan genocide?
Mm.
Every April, people commemorate the Rwandan genocide of the Tutsis, right? But what about the genocide in Burundi a year prior? That even when the genocide in Burundi took place, when the Hutus were massacred in Burundi, the US ambassador at that time sent a letter to Paul Kagame and the president of Rwanda at the time, Habyarimana, telling them that based on what has just unfolded in Burundi, he pleads with them to sign a peace accord because there is a potential of a genocide in Burundi, I'm sorry, in Rwanda to take place. And for maybe the listeners, right, or the viewers, they may not have the map of the region in front of them for this to make sense. They only hear the word Rwanda, they only hear the word Congo, they only hear the word Burundi. They do not know that these three countries border each other. Rwanda and Burundi are neighbors, right? To the north of Burundi is Rwanda, to the south of Rwanda is Burundi. Both Rwanda and Burundi borders the DRC. The east of Congo is Rwanda and Burundi. What does that actually mean? If in Rwanda you have three ethnic groups, Hutus, Tutsis, and Twa, in Burundi, similar, right? You will also have the same ethnic groups in DRC. It's logical. So one can talk about Rwanda without talking about Burundi. So the comments that Kagame is stating now goes around the conflict that's happening between Rwanda and Burundi at this time. President Paul Kagame, the same way he supports rebels in DRC, M23, he also supports rebel groups destabilizing Burundi, the Red Tabara.
Red Tabara, yeah.
Clearly, it's been documented that even the Rwandan regime, they go to refugee camps, recruit Burundian refugees, arm them, and send them to destabilize Burundi. That has been Burundi's interest in DRC to stop the red tabara that Kagame is using to destabilize Burundi. Right. So why?
It's like what Rwanda is doing in the Congo, Burundi is doing it, and Kagame doesn't like it.
Exactly. So as you see the situation unfold and what Kagame may say, in the end, the biggest losers of all of this are the people, right? If you look at the North and South Kivu, and I ask anybody, give me names of tribes in North and South Kivu. You are going to hear Hutu, you're going to hear Tutsi, you're going to probably hear the Bambuti, right? But are there any other ethnic groups in these regions? Of course.
Absolutely.
Right? I could even argue close to 100. There are so many ethnic groups in this region because the land of North Kivu and South Kivu is much bigger than Rwanda and Burundi. Right? That the people of the area, of many ethnic groups, are being sacrificed for, I would call it capitalist interest, right? That these presidents who consider themselves from one ethnic group, right? In the case of Kagame, is considering himself as a Tutsi and a savior of the Tutsi and so on, does not see how he's a neo-colonial agent of the West. Because while Africans are dying, the minerals are flowing. The minerals haven't stopped, no matter what he says. And even if his family and his close partners have benefited from it, the Rwandan people are suffering. You know of the Free Congo movement. There is the Free Congo hashtag. Where's the Free Rwanda hashtag? Do we realize that Rwandans today suffer the most in the region? I'm not talking about the horrific crimes taking place, right, in the Congo. I'm talking about how they've been muzzled, right? And I use things that people can find online. Rwandan soldiers are dying in Congo. They are dying in Congo in mass because they are fighting, right? When they die, their bodies are carried back to Rwanda and they are buried in silence.
Secret.
And when they're buried, their family cannot even mourn them. So there are hundreds of families in Rwanda where their sons have died in Congo in this conflict that Kagame is doing, that they are not allowed to have a funeral. That's a very bizarre situation. That reminds me of Israel, right? You can't tell how many Israeli soldiers have died, the numbers. They keep that number so low, they don't want the world to know. That's what's happening with Rwanda. Like families are not able to mourn their loved ones who have been sent in an unjust war. And no one is able to challenge it inside. If you dare to challenge it inside of the country, you'll be arrested, you'll be killed. Twali, the journalist, I was honored to share an award with him posthumously, the Frank Twali, the Rwandan journalist. Very courageous journalist who spent his time exposing the regime of Kagame. They killed him. Right? And he was awarded the Victoire Ingabire's Peace Award, right? Victoire Ingabire, the Rwandan woman who ran for president, right now is in solitary confinement in Rwanda. What about all the women organizations in the world fighting for the women's rights? They're not talking about Victoire Ingabire. Diane Rwigara, another Rwandan woman who ran for president. Every Rwandan woman who's ever run for president in Rwanda has been jailed. Is that bizarre or what, right? The Deo Mushahidi, genocide survivor, challenging the Rwandan regime, has been numerous times tortured, arrested. Opposition leaders arrested. Kagame winning with, I can go on and on. And the entire time when I'm hearing people saying, no, Rwandans, I say, no, we need a free Rwanda movement because the Rwandans can't even talk. If the Rwandan regime has the military power to take over a state bigger than Rwanda, what do you think is happening to Rwandan people inside of the country?
Mm.
Same is true with the Hotel Rwanda gentleman, Paul Wosasabegina.
Mhm.
Can you imagine one day you decide to travel? You travel, right? I travel too. You get on the flight. You fall asleep on the flight. By the time you wake up, you land in a country that was not in the itinerary. That's what happened to Paul Rusesabagina. He took a flight to go to Burundi. His plane landed in Kigali.
Yeah. They hijacked the whole plan. The whole plan.
But this happened, right? We only got condemnation. The companies that had the plane should be sued. I'm sure there is a lawsuit process, right? But they should be held accountable. Rwandan government should be held accountable to literally kidnap someone in a plane. Like they kidnap you in a plane to take you back there. So what I can go on and on about the suffering of the Rwandan people that they can't even speak. That in our advocacy, when we are speaking about Rwanda, we need to be clear that we are talking about the Rwandan regime of Paul Kagame, because even the citizens of that country, they can't even, if you are inside of the country and you dare speak out, you will be killed, you'll be in prison, you'll be pushed to exile, and so on. They even killed a gospel singer, Kizito, a survivor of the Rwandan genocide, right? Who sang about peace and unity amongst the people of Rwanda, was arrested and was found dead in his jail cell, and the government said that he killed himself with a pillow. So in that whole process, when we even talk about what Kagame is doing in Burundi, when we're talking about what he's doing in Congo, when we say these Rwandans, we have to be very sensitive in knowing that the Rwandan people are not behind Paul Kagame. The Rwandan people are suffering. They can't even speak. They can't even organize in a way where they are successful. That the liberation of Congo will actually help the liberation of Rwanda. That as we say free Congo, we should say free Rwanda, because a free Rwanda will not have a leader in that country sending the military of Rwanda to destabilize the DRC.
Yeah, and I know I'm already over time, but I really want us to touch on Israel and Palestine really quick. So I'm just gonna sum it into one question, because before, this peace deal, there was the visit of the Israeli president to the Congo, and he came symbolically, and I said it was the very first time. My question, in the midst of having, because I've read a few UN reports that was mentioning weapons, Israeli-made weapons found at the end of the M23 in the Congo. But I'm really curious about your perspective regarding why does Herzog's visit matter in this timeline? And then my second question is, when we look at the Palestine and the Palestine issues, and we see the occupation, we see everything, how can you mirror that to what's going on in the Congo, and moving forward, what must be done?
It's a very loaded question, and I love it. But it's important when we're talking about Israel, right? We're not talking about just the visit. Israel has been engaged in DRC, especially under this regime of Tshisekedi, but as well as the regime of Joseph Kabila. I recall writing, I think it was in 2015, an article on the Washington Post on an Israeli firm working for Kabila. It's a very bizarre situation that took place in 2015, right? That the Joseph Kabila regime hired Mer Group, Mer Securities. Mer Group is a surveillance security agency that provided services to the DRC beyond even security. they were hired as a lobbyist for the Kabila regime. So imagine the Congolese government paid an Israeli firm in Tel Aviv money to come to Washington and hire lobbyists on behalf of the regime. All right. So MER securities have been engaged there. And I can go on and on with the use of Pegasus that DRC has purchased service from Israeli spy firms to spy on Congolese politicians and activists. And some of the activists, some of them we know, were arrested in DRC, not for doing illegal actions, not for doing a rebellion, but for organizing to stop the president of the Congo for violating the Congolese constitution. They were organizing for a free and fair election. They ended up in jail for that, thanks to this Israeli spyware Pegasus. But under the Tshisekedi regime, you can look at Israel just as the president visited. What did the Tshisekedi regime do? Tshisekedi spoke at APAC in Washington, D.C. An African president who was chair of the African Union, where the African Union, right, has a clear position on Palestine, he decided to go speak at APAC. After speaking at APAC, what else did he do? Of course, Herzog came to Congo, but who went to Israel? Tshisekedi went to Israel before Herzog came, right? He went there. People should even look at the speech that he made at APAC, where he was stating that Congo is going to open its economic office in Jerusalem.
Violation of international law.
Imagine, right? So yes, Herzog came, but let's follow what has been going on with this regime. But what did they get in exchange? Of course, military training, but also the Israeli government was exposed, right? After October 7th, didn't we get the notice that 200 IDF reservists left DRC to go fight and participate in the genocide of Palestinians? The first question was, why do we have 200 IDF soldiers in DRC? Who brought them? When did they come, right? There has been close cooperation between the Congolese government and the Israeli government. It didn't start with Tshisekedi, but it's strengthening under the Tshisekedi, unfortunately, due to the evangelical Christians. Because they are, the evangelical Christians in DRC are connecting the regime of Tshisekedi to biblical terms. And they are using the narrative, right, of this son, prodigal, I don't know if I should call him prodigal son, that is being blessed, and they support the state of Israel, right? So that it's coming from a particular angle of evangelical Christians around the circle of Tshisekedi, who supports Israel, supports the narrative of Israel, and disregards the lives of Palestinians and the existence of Palestinians. So when we see that, and we see the president of Israel coming, it's just the continuation of a Zionist agenda in DRC and across the African continent. And prior of him coming, Paula White was in Kinshasa, right? The advisor on Trump on religious questions. She has an office now at the White House. So the whole circle of evangelical Christians around Tshisekedi are pushing the Zionist agenda on the question of Palestine.
And what about regarding the issue of the question of Palestine and then the situation of the Congo, the way the Palestinian people have been organizing, what should be then done for the Congolese youth, kind of like to close out, because I think you kind of mentioned that at the beginning.
The DRC has known a genocide since 1996, right? The latest genocide. We can go to the King Leopold's time, and I believe the youth of Congolese Action Youth Network have done a fantastic work in explaining what Genocost is, right? From a historical perspective, but I'll focus on 1996 to present. We have lived a genocide. We know what genocide looked like. We know what it feels like for your history to be erased, for people to ignore your suffering, for people to make light of the issue that is not a problem, right? The territorial integrity, the question of accountability and justice. So we know, we've lived it. There is no question in my mind that what's happening in Palestine is genocide. I've never questioned. It's not about October 7th. Even before that, I knew, because of the work we've done with Palestinians, right, that there is genocide taking place. Imagine there was a Congolese rapper. He came to New York. I can't remember, probably over a decade ago. He came to New York and knew a few Palestinians. And this Congolese rapper is from Kisangani. He actually lived the 6-day war in Kisangani. So I didn't want to disclose his name. Now you disclose his name, but that's it, right?
Okay.
So while he was in New York, we met with Palestinians. We went to their homes. They greeted us. We had fantastic dinner, and we were just exchanging life story. I shared my family story. He showed some videos of the 6-day war, and the Palestinians started crying. And one of them pulled the video of one of the town. I think they showed us video of Jenin. They show us pictures of the West Bank, what's happening, the mistreatment of Palestinians in the West Bank, what the settlers are doing. And it was fascinating to see him, right? Let's say, that looks like Kisangani, because we saw houses with bullets through the walls. And he was like, that's like Kisangani. Like we could literally, like we were sharing real experience, like lived experience of two oppressed people at the same time. And we saw the humanity in our lived experience, that you are living what we are living, right? And I carry that story with me because these Palestinians, in the work that we've done, they've always been at the forefront of Congolese struggle. We organized Occupy Wall Street, and we participated there. So while I was there, I'm engaging people around the Congo, Occupy, right as what was the name of the Zukoti Park? I almost forgot the name of the park. So I would go to Zukoti Park and talk about the Congo. And then the Palestinians also will be there. And then we discover that there is a guy named Peter Grossman who lives in Brooklyn, who has a hedge fund called FG Hemisphere. And FG Hemisphere is a vulture fund suing the Congo for a $3 million debt that Congo had with Yugoslavia in the 90s and trying to collect hundreds of millions on it. Do you know what this Palestinian did?
Yeah.
They organized Occupy Peter Grossman Lawn. We mobilized Zukoti Park. I invited the Congolese community. I invited Africans and everything. We showed up at Peter Grossman's house in Fort Greene in Brooklyn, protesting. You know how many Congolese were there?
How many? Just you? Wow.
Do you know how many Palestinians were there? A lot. How many other activists were there? A lot. Right? That they came to support the Congolese people. When Congolese people didn't even know that they were protesting on their behalf. When we did Congo in Harlem, they come to Congo in Harlem. They participate in our activities. They are with us in the struggle. So today, when I'm seeing people say, what about Congo? When people are talking about Palestine, I said, you don't know anything about Palestinians. The Palestinians,
They don't do research.
Yeah, they have been supporting us. The student at Berzet University did Congo Week. The person telling you what about the Congo has never even participated in Congo Week. But Palestinian student at Berzet University over in Palestine Berzit University, everybody can Google Berzit University. Palestinian students at Berzit University participated in Congo Week. When was the last time any of you participated in Congo Week? I say, I'm going to organize in my community. So it's not about what about Congo, what about Palestine? The Palestinian, the people in struggle are always allied to one another. We connect, we work together, we build with one another. And there's something in my heart that's really disturbing me. There has been too many groups of young Congolese appearing out of nowhere doing advocacy, saying free Congo, free Sudan, riding even on the free Palestine hashtag, connecting with even Palestinian activists, and some of them for right reasons, right? They actually want to help the Congo and assume that these groups are credible. You just asked me a question on the Israeli president visiting the DRC. Do you know that many of the Congolese groups talking about free Palestine, free Congo, free Sudan, didn't even have one post on the visit of the Israeli ambassador, Israeli president? So for me, the litmus test now is if anybody is advocating for Congo, right? And they are saying free Congo, free Palestine, and you go to their feed and you don't see any comment on Isaac Herzog visit to DRC, know that they are not fighting for a free Congo or free Palestine or free Sudan. And it's very, very important to not be confused about the struggle of the Congo. The struggle of the Congo is a struggle of liberation. The struggle of Palestinian is a liberation struggle as well, that we are fighting to control our land and resources, just as Palestinians. They are facing a genocide. We are facing a genocide. And the same is true with what's happening in Sudan, that we have to unite, right? And that unity is not by words, it's by deeds. What are you doing on a daily basis? It's not just a hashtag question. It's reaching out to Sudanese activists about the support that they need, the Palestinians support that they need, working with them. Same is true also with the Congolese, and be clear that there can be compromise on principles, right? You don't go and hang out with those who are oppressing the Congolese people and think that you can come on social media and say free Congo and we're not going to call you out. We know who you are and we will expose you. But for the Congolese, especially for the Congolese youth, it's very fascinating, right? I say, especially the Congolese youth, I look at them and say, am I young still? I'm looking at my gray hair.
People still look up to you.
Yeah, but it's time. I am amazed, right? It's a very humble moment for me, right? Because back in the day, like what the young people Congolese are doing now is amazing. Like the level of research, I'm learning from you. You're the one who got me the information about a Canadian company that, what's his name? Dan Gertler.
Yeah.
I knew about the cement company. I knew that there was a cement company that Dan Gertler has that's building the wall, but I didn't know where they were registered. I found out through you. You were able to find the doc. So the level of research that young Congolese are doing, how they're using social media. Man, I was using Windows Movie Maker to make my videos. You know, you guys are TikTok doing. I'm serious. Like I still have the computer. I was using Windows. I can show you my YouTube video. I said this one was Windows Movie Maker. Look at the font, right? But you all are putting like caption on your videos, right? That you shouldn't, and that's the comment I always make to you. Like you shouldn't look up to me and say, man, please do something. I'm looking up to you all now. I'm learning from you all, like, because you know how to get the message out. All I can share is the mistakes we made before, right? The mistake in believing that the change will come from Washington. It will not. All we can do in Washington is put pressure. That's the only thing that we can do, is put pressure to make sure that U.S. taxpayers' money doesn't fund the conflict. but there is a greater question about our local elite. And the local elite that we know. Why? Because some of the children, we went to school with them. They are our friends, right? How many of us know, like, the uncle or brother of the prime minister? We all know somebody who's in government. And then we feel shy to calling them out. And then I say, it's not about the individual, it's the system. These are the people who flew to Washington to give away $3 trillion worth of our minerals. If it's your family member and they're doing that, call them out. Right?
And some of them seems to, I don't want to say work with the government, but just in the same style, they are not condemning what the local elites is doing in the Congo, yet they're shouting free Congo. You cannot stay silent when the Congolese government under Felix Tshisekedi is allowing 200 homes being evicted because Ivanhoe is asking for it, which is a company that is mining. The same Ivanhoe that is going to benefit from this peace deal, or this mineral deal, you're going to ignore that and yet say on Instagram, free Congo. You're going to say on Instagram, free Palestine. And I think that's the thing that makes me uncomfortable when I look at all these organizations that ends with the word Congo at the end, because they are not rooted in justice. Because true justice really will be able to look at, I don't want to say evil, but look at injustice in the Congo and being able to call out, whether it is called Joseph Kabila or Felix Tshisekedi or Paul Kagame or, Israel. Whatever that injustice is, you should be able to call it out. And when you start truncating the truth because you don't want your own dirt, you don't want your own, I guess, opinion to be out there, your preference in terms of who you prefer to lead the country, then perhaps you should not be leading the Free Congo movement. You should not be talking about a Free Congo if you're not ready for justice to come. So.
The reason why these groups will always exist is because in terms of our mobilization in DRC, we have not been clear about class, right? We think that we are all one people. Not everybody is rich. Not everybody has access, right? The vast majority of the Congolese are dispossessed. A small group of Congolese have the privilege to travel. I'm only going to speak about myself because I want to call out anybody. I'm able to get on a flight and travel across the world. That's a privilege, right? I'm able to meet people. I'm able to organize people. Not every Congolese have that opportunity. So when you have that privilege, you have a choice. You have a choice to be with the people or to be with the elite. I could easily be a government official if I wanted today.
100%.
Right?
I actually mentioned it. It was funny, but during the last election, your full name was mentioned. I was like, did he get elected? I didn't know Kambale Musavuli was running.
I'm telling you. And I received a lot of phone calls whenever that young man, I think his name is Eli, with my name, he became a member of parliament for the province where I'm from, right? But the fundamental question for liberation of the Congo, where Patrice Lumumba stood, why Patrice Lumumba wanted to become prime minister, why even in his decisions, he went to parliament to get a decision for parliament to move for anything, because he still believed in the power of the people. Many people who are saying free Congo, who are Congolese, they're not saying free Congo because they want the power to be with the Congolese people. They're saying free Congo because they want the next contract, the next job opportunity, that the family's status quo is not affected. We do, just like it is in many countries around the world, including the United States, we do have families who have power in the Congo from independence to today, right? That you can't just decide to do a change in the Congo not knowing the power structure inside of the country. But now for the young Congolese who didn't decide to be born in that wealth, right? We didn't decide to be born in that privilege. You have to make that choice. You have to say, Kwame Nkrumah also was a privileged Ghanaian. Patrice Lumumba was also a privileged Congolese. Patrice Lumumba was in Europe in the 50s. How many Congolese could be cleared to get on a flight to go to Belgium? At the time, you had to be from a particular class. But something happens when you are in a class where you see that the vast majority of the people are suffering. And that's the story that, I think I will end through that story. When I was a kid, I went to a school called Flamboyant. And my 5th grade, I did it in Petits Anges in Regini. And my 6th grade, to go now to secondary school, my mom took me out of Petits Anges and put me into a school, and I felt like I was punished. She put me in an underserved school, my 6th grade, and the school was called Petit Bois. The school is in Kinshasa. For people who know Kinshasa, you heard of the town called Kinshasa, you know where it is. This is the school where I had to walk to go to school, to get to it. So in the morning, my siblings still went to Flamboyant and so on. But I was going to Petit Bois, right? So I'll wait till they left for me to walk. I'll look down in the street if anybody saw me. Nobody saw me, so I started walking because I was also so ashamed to go there. Like the school didn't have roof. When it rained, literally the rain came through the classroom, like we all will be wet and everything. So I was like, why is my mom punishing me like this? Like, what is this about, right? But the more I went to the school, the more I got appreciation of what my mom did. Few realization came to me. At 6th grade, I already had a calculator. My classmates did not have calculators. And they were very smart. They could do mental math better than me. So I was very confused. So I come home and tell my mother, I said, Mom, these kids are really smart. And I said, some of them don't have backpacks. No, they'll have a bag where they put their notebook, literally a plastic bag. They put their pen, notebook in there. I said, but I'm the only one with a backpack in my class. They don't have backpacks. They're so smart, And my mom, and she'll smile, right? Every time I told her, I would tell her, like, whatever I discover, like, they are smart just like my friends are from Boyon, but why don't they have backpack? And she won't say anything, she'll just smile. And since I was going to 7th grade, right, moving into secondary school, we had a play. The play was called Le Curé de Cucugnan. It's a famous French play. What would that be in English? The Cucugnan's priest, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So I played that priest in the play and everything, and my mom came. I still have a picture of. My mom took a picture of me with my classmates. I kept that picture till today. And I had a conversation at the end of the school year with my mom, where she said, the reason why you went there is I noticed how you were changing. And I wanted you to know that there are other kids in this country who don't have the opportunity that you have, but they are as smart as you and even better than you. That was 6th grade. I'm now 44 years old, and I still remember that lesson. That my mom took me from a very privileged school, took me to the school where when it rains, right, all of us are wet. And I was there with them. That anywhere I've gone till now, I'm always thinking about that. What about the Congolese who are smart, who have the potential, who don't have the same opportunity that I have, that many of us have? What can we do to make sure that they have the same opportunity? And that's the message that young Congolese who happen to be in a privileged family with access, they have to ask themselves that the Congo, one of the richest countries on the planet, that now we have to quote Trump, talking about making money in the Congo while our people are dying of starvation. Our people are dying in poverty. Somebody in Washington is making money from there, and we are watching, and we are not fighting for it. That you have to make a choice. Do you want to be with the people, or you want to be with the people who are exploiting the ordinary citizens? I chose my camp. I know where I need to be, right? I need to be with these young people who are carrying plastic bags, who are smarter than me, who can transform the Congo and provide opportunities to them so that they can transform the Congo. I'm not interested in a contract to build a road somewhere for these elites. I'm not interested in a government position. I'm interested in participatory budgeting, where the people of the Congo are deciding where the wealth will go. I'm interested in collective organization, where we will come together for transformation. And all of us have to make the choice. I've made mine, and that's a call for the other young Congolese that in 2025, going to 2026, this is the time for us to unite. It doesn't matter where you are from in the DRC. If you call yourself Congolese, you know what it is. It is in our blood. We are the sons and daughters of Patrice Lumumba, and we must continue our struggle to liberate the country so that we can live in peace and dignity for the benefit of our people and for the transformation of the African continent.
Brother Kambale, thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you always.
That was Brother Kambale Musavuli. Today's conversation was really long, and I appreciate all of you being connected. And that's the reason why I created with Maurice Carney, our executive director, and Kojo Kito, and all the people in the background to have this type of event or platform where we could break down the situation of the Congo to folks who don't understand what's going on, who wants to learn what's going on, folks who wants to join the movement, people who want to learn more, but also people who want to be able to speak freely. And the reason why we're doing all of this is because we really want to create this, obviously in the sense of free speech, of course, but also really to have this type of conversations that are really challenging and uncomfortable. Conversation that can challenge the current narrative. Conversations that can challenge the system, the status quo, the power dynamics, and also the contradiction within movement. And that's very important if you really want to achieve liberation. You also need to self-reflect, look inward. And Brother Kambale, he said by using words that meant to him, because he was really trying to speak to everybody. Yes, we do Congo Unfiltered in English, speaking to all of you. But Brother Kambale spoke to Rwandan people. He spoke to African people. He spoke to American people. He spoke to the people who stand next or stand for human rights, the people who stand for women rights, children rights. people who understands international law and want international law to be applied, to be implemented, to be enforced. Not just for the case of the Congo, but even for other issues around the world. And he mentioned some of them. I was kind of like going through the comments, and there was this one comment that said, not sure if I can pull that comment, that said, bro, don't forget about Uganda by Thrones KMS. We're not forgetting about Uganda. I'm not forgetting about Uganda. And I'm going to mention before we kind of like close out about President Museveni's comments, which I think was really wild. I think it was this one. I think this one. And he said that the Ituri province in DRC was part of Bunyoro. That is a few days after President Tshisekedi and President Kagame, of 3 weeks, I guess, the strategic mineral deal or peace deal, whatever you want to call it. A few days after the city of Uvira had fallen, after the Rwandan-backed militia captured a Congolese city. It was a video. I'm not going to bore you with that video, but it's essentially claiming that the Ituri province of the DRC was part of Uganda, essentially, because the empire, the kingdom of Bunyoro was part of, it was in Uganda, right? And I've seen for the past few days exchange and people turning themselves into historian or just folks, because we are provided with kind of like the intelligence. You know, you want to document yourself, you want to read, find more. Is it true that the Ituri province was part of Uganda? But I think that beyond that statement, it's very important for us to really put this case at rest, because these type of narrative will continue because and simply because the Congo today is weak. The Congo's leadership today is weak because folks can see how international law has given up on the Congo. How international law is allowing Rwanda not just to invade the Congo continuously, consistently, systematically, but also occupying it, killing people, looting his resources. And all of that happened when the almighty United States is there. Because the headquarters of the United Nations is in the US, in New York. The US has a veto power. So Uganda sees it. The president of Uganda, I really have to be like separate. And he's like, well, I guess we can play that game too. We could also make those claims, send our kids to school, scholars and folks, to create a narrative to support that claim, even if it's true, right? But I think it's important to address that. Because this is where really history must be stopped being abused and law must begin to speak. I am no historian, so I'm not going to enter in the history part of it. And even if it's true, it's very important for people to know what the law says. Because whatever kingdom existed centuries ago, whether it's Bunyoro, Rwanda, or others, those kingdoms, and even the kingdom of the Congo, ceased to have legal relevance the moment the continent of Africa was carved, the moment Africa entered the era of independence. That's international law. And that's why in 1960, when the DRC became independent from Belgium, just like any other countries in Africa, it was admitted at the United Nations with clear, defined borders. So from that moment, and it is the case for all the 54 countries in Africa, and that does not just apply to Africa, it also applies to other countries. That's why Russia is being slapped with sanctions today, because of the invasion of Ukraine, right? But how come you're going to slap sanctions on Russia for invading Ukraine? Because historically, Russia has claimed, just like I would say that Mexico has claims, right? But then if we can slap sanctions on Russia for invading and occupying countries, why can't we slap sanctions on Israel for invading and occupying a different country? Why can't we slap sanctions on Rwanda for invading and occupying another country, the Congo? So from that moment, those borders became internationally recognized. The borders of the Congo, from North, South Kivu, Bakongo, Katanga, these are internationally recognized and legally protected borders. So we got to stop at some point bringing historical stories, and we're going to start realizing that this law, or the law, international law, is a sovereign fact. And that sovereign fact, talking about the borders of the Congo, 1960, the United Nations, the African Union, both institutions understood something very important and very clear. That if post-colonial Africa reopened the debates based on pre-colonial kingdoms, just like President Kagame did when he went to Burkina Faso or Benin, I believe, I think it was Benin, and talk about studying the borders of the Congo, because he also has claim to the Kivu, and even instructed the parliaments to look into it. And now we have Uganda, that if post pre-colonial kingdoms are being brought on the table for debates to figure out new borders, the continents will descend into endless war. That's just a fact. And this is why really the principle of, and I've written that when I was responding to Representative Jackson, who was like saying that the Kivu used to be part of Rwanda. I'm not sure where he got, well, I know where he got that talking point, but it was really responsible of him to say that. Because then that gives carte blanche for Russia that the United States sanctioned with the EU to say that Ukraine, the Donbass region, used to be Russian territory, therefore we have claim to it. That the principle of, and that's Latin, uti possidetis juris, was adopted, means that any existing borders at the independence must be respected regardless of earlier histories. So what you found, the moment that you become a nation recognized by the United Nations, by other institutions, that land is yours. So when a sitting president revisits centuries old claims to just trying to like really justify borders, territories, we are going outside of that, I would say, scientific or academic curiosity. You are directly challenging the current legal order that has kept that not just Africa from tearing itself apart, but also other countries. And if we accept the logic that the Kivu in the 21st century, today is December 13, 2025, the Kivus, North Kivus, or whatever Kivu Paul Kagame sees fit, used to be part of Rwanda. That the Ituri used to be part of Uganda. Because what existed once upon a time. Then there is no country on earth that will be safe. There is no country in Africa that will be safe. It means that Nigeria can disappear. It means that Kenya can fractures. And even those countries themselves, Uganda, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, Mozambique, Seychelles, South Africa, African borders, or all these 54 countries in Africa, their borders, all of them with no exception becomes negotiable. So I just want to be clear. I'm not forgetting about Uganda. We're not forgetting about Uganda, not at all. So what was recognized in 1960 remains valid today because this is law. No neighborhood country, not Uganda, not Rwanda, not Paul Kagame, not Museveni, not anyone has legal basis to claim even 1 centimeter, 1 inch, 1 inch, 2.54 centimeters of Congolese territory. And that is law, that is sovereignty, and that is responsibility. And talking about it is the right thing to do. And that is where the debate should end. So I hope that you like this episode. If you do, please make sure to check out our website, freecongo.org. See how you can help. Many ways that you can help, be involved. Signing or sending letters to your elected official so that you can tell them, if you're in the US, that you should not, or that you do not want your taxpayer money to be funding war anywhere overseas. And you can also, if you have the means to donate financially, we are doing our end of the year campaign, trying to raise again $100,000. And you can donate if you can, because we have been doing a tremendous amount of work, and that has been with the contribution and support of every person putting $1, $2, $10. And if you cannot in this economy, with the inflation and things getting expensive, we understand. Then you can donate your time and join our small army of volunteers. So my name was Gaëtan. I hope that you appreciate this. Please give us a follow on YouTube, Friends with the Congo, on Instagram, Congo Friends, on X, on Instagram, and on Facebook. So in the meantime, I'm going to catch you next week for a new episode, a new conversation about how to liberate the Congo. Thank you so much. Happy Saturday.